Greetings, fellow moviegoers, and welcome to Movie Central, the place to talk about movies, TV shows based on movies, toys based on movies, games based on movies, and rides based on movies. I'm your host, Mr. CCS, and this is my pet gorilla, George. As you can probably tell if you live in the United States or most other parts of the world, we're in the midst of the colder months here. However, how about I warm y'all up by talking about a movie that takes place during the warmer months of the year? How about in the midst of summer? On a beach? How about on Amity Island? This dark and terrifying tale begins with a man named Peter Benchley. Benchley was fascinated with the mere torturous idea of shark attacks, something gained after learning of the exploitation of famous shark fisherman Frank Mundus. What followed was a grueling period of time before his novel, a story involving an enormous great white shark gobbling up poor members of the island community called Amity, was released. Of course, as we know it, the novel was a success, remaining on the bestseller list of books for a grand total of 44 weeks, and that caught the eye of one young director, Steven Spielberg. You'll hear me talk a lot about Steven Spielberg over time, but something that is worthy to note is that he was only in his mid to late 20s when he started working on a massive $1 million production that was a nightmare to shoot, which included animatronic malfunctions and a ton of in-camera problems. Nonetheless, Steven pushed through, which resulted in a huge success for not just him, but Universal Studios, because the movie made more money at the box office more than any other movie and held the title for highest grossing movie of all time for 2 years before it was eventually dethroned by Star Wars. However, nearly 50 years later, does this movie still make you afraid of what lurks beneath it? Today, we're going to find out. This is the 1975 magnum opus, Jaws. When a young woman is killed by a shark while skinny dipping near the New England tourist town of Amity Island, Chief Police Martin Brody, played by the late Roy Scheider, wants to close the beaches, but Mayor Larry Vaughn, played by the late Murray Hamilton, overrules him, fearing that the loss of tourist revenue will cripple the town. Ichthyologist Matt Hooper, played by Richard Dreyfuss, and grizzled sea ship captain Quint, played by the late Robert Shaw, offered to help Brody capture the killer beast, and the trio engage in an epic battle of man versus nature. There is nothing I can say about Jaws that hasn't already been said before. It's deeply important, frightening, and a unique movie that would lead to many great things, but sadly it also means that there were some negative aspects as part of its legacy. But I'll get there in a minute. Jaws' legacy as the greatest shark movie of all time, as well as one of the scariest movies I've ever seen, is important. But the question remains, how could a movie from nearly 50 years still hold up so well? Important to note that Jaws focuses on 4 major characters, 3 humans and 1 monster. Let's start with our trio. First, we have Martin Brody, new chief of police on Amity Island, a husband and a father. Brody's main priority is to protect the citizens of his town, even if that means shutting beaches down to protect them from a man-eating shark. Brody's skittish attitude and eagerness to protect the people that surround him make it all the more reasonable that he's one of the people to go out and risk his life to kill this deadly shark. And he's the one to do it. Brody is a great character due to the writing that surrounded him and Roy Scheider's iconic performance, which he did twice thanks to Jaws 2, but less so in that one. Now we move on to the marine biologist, Matt Hooper. While the least interesting of the group, what I loved most about him is his eagerness to help. Seeing as he has the experience in the ocean, he's the one that dives into the water in the dead of night to find proof of the monster, as well as the first one to try to kill it. His job makes him qualified to be on the orca hunting the beast just as much as the other two. It's a shame that he didn't return for the sequel, because he would have made a great impact on that movie as well. Finally, we have probably my favorite character in this movie after Brody, shark hunter Bartholomew Marion Quint. The depth that the late British actor Robert Shaw gave to Quint was unbelievable. The gruff voice, the persistence in wanting to take out the beast, and even his background makes him sound like a deep and misunderstood man. The tragic part about his character is that he is only the one killed out of the main three in the show, and in a very brutal and nasty fashion too, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So, a police chief, a marine biologist, and a shark hunter all go out on the ocean in a small boat to kill, well, this. That's right, the antagonist of the movie is this large 25-foot, 3-ton weighing great white shark Bruce, named after Steve Spielberg's lawyer. Marketing describes this thing as a mindless eating machine. That could not be far from the truth. Bruce is a sadistic, intelligent, and downright ruthless monster that terrorizes the ocean, and that's why many fear to dive deep into the ocean. Now, why is Bruce sadistic? Well, it all comes down to his prey that he kills. The first victim to feel his wrath is Chrissy Watkins, a girl who was simply trying to have a nice morning skinny dip, as one does off the coast of Maine. He then follows this up by killing a boy named Alex Kinton, a sailor named Ben Gardner, and a lifeguard, whilst harming Brody's son Mike in the process. The beast doesn't make his presence known and drags his victims down in secret in an attempt to taunt those helplessly watching. When Brody, Hooper, and Quint make their way out into the middle of the ocean to stop the raging monster, it nearly kills both Hooper and Brody and claims the life of Quint by biting down viciously on his stomach. Hell, he murders Quint in front of Brody and continues to taunt the chief by showing his teeth still containing the chunks of the dead captain. The whole time you see this beast and beg for it to be killed, which it finally manages to be killed with the help of oxygen tanks and a shotgun, allowing its remains to sink to the bottom of the ocean, never to haunt anyone again. If it wasn't increasingly obvious, Bruce, or the shark, is one of my favorite monsters in movie history. The build-up to his appearance is incredible, as you don't see the beast in full until very late into the movie. And when you do, you're fearing for the trio as you were, as do they, that they're going to become shark children. And when the beast is finally killed, the relief sinks in, and you are happy that something like this can't happen again. Can't happen again! So, those are the main characters. The other characters in the story are those also trying to be sharks, like the aforementioned Ben Gardner, to show ignorance and greed, Mayor Vaughn, who is supposed to push the fact that no one can trust Brody, as well as Brody's family to show Brody's soft side. I don't really need to mention the shark chum because their deaths lead to some of the most iconic kills in history, but I've mentioned that. As far as the effects go, the shark looks incredible for nearly 50-year-old effects. It's impressive animatronic work that still holds up after all this time. Meanwhile, you watch something like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania Day 1 and the effects look surprisingly dated. I'm sorry, I know that came out of nowhere, but it's ridiculous that this horrible movie was on the short list for the Oscars for VFX, and that Jaws can get recognition for its effects at the Oscars in 1976. It's sad when I have to mention that. Anyways, that little tangent aside, I still really like the shark animatronic work in this movie, as well as the blood effects and the way they executed a lot of these grisly effects and kills, such as Chrissy's death, in which they dragged the actress around on a rope underwater, and the dead body of Ben Gardner being shot underwater in a swimming pool. Also, the orca crumbling around Brody in the finale looks great. As we move on to the music, we have one of the most iconic scores of all time from the maestro of music, John Williams. I've talked about John on this channel a bit, but nowhere nearly enough, so I promise to rectify that problem in the future. Anyways, John gave a spine-chilling and eerie score that still, to this very freaking day, holds up extremely well. Those iconic two notes instantly alert you to the presence of the beast. But there are other pieces of music that I also really like in this movie, such as Night Siege. Just listen for yourself, and you'll thank me later. Now, as far as the horror goes, for a movie that is rated PG, surprisingly not rated R, but a PG-13 by today's standards, the kills and the horror are surprisingly complex. I mentioned the deaths in detail and the amount of blood that's spewed, so it's surprising that Jaws is rated PG to this very day. So, as tell, I absolutely love Jaws. It's scary, it's suspenseful, and it's what a horror movie should be. Jaws unfortunately led to many awful duplicates and other attempts at a shark movie, but none of them even compare to this terrifying and haunting masterpiece. Not even its own sequels. The iconic shark movie will always be Jaws, and Bruce will always be the iconic monster that haunts the seven seas. And that's the exact reason why Jaws earned a 10 out of 10. Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, you realize it isn't, and that this beast will remain in the seas for the rest. Well, that's it for this review. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a man in a red suit I have to give cookies to, presents to open, and large bodies of water I have to stay away from. So tune in on January 11th when Movie Central returns to focus on a remake for classics still never undercovered. What that movie is will be revealed on that day. But until then, my name is Mr. CCS, this is Movie Central, and that, my friends, is a wrap. See you next week.